Jeff, and hello, Lee. And here I am, Nomali. Jeff, we haven't heard from you in a long time in the popular podcast, The Daily Evolver. And so we thought, why don't we get you engaged for a bit?
Yeah.
It's the end of the year. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing great. I took the summer off.
And the fall off, apparently.
And here it is, December.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm my New Year's resolution is to get back in the saddle of doing the Daily Evolver in some form. I'm still playing with it and working it out. But yeah, I mean, it's what I do. It's I look at the news, I read the newspaper, and I think integral thoughts. I think, and that's what I've been flogging for all these years. So, that's still happening. And apparently people are interested, and I will pick up the mantle again.
Yes, very good. Well, hopefully, maybe even just connecting with you today might inspire you a little bit to talk again. Yeah.
Let's see how it's going on this crazy planet.
Yeah. What were you doing other than since you were not doing so much sort of podcasting? What else kept you busy? The last
well, in terms of anything that would resemble work, I was posting on Twitter and continue to. And I really actually have come to like Twitter, and I find it to be a place for people to, I often say we fight and friend our way forward. And on Twitter, and I guess other social media too, because I've never, Facebook and the other ones, I can't get by my antibodies. For some reason I can. With Twitter, and I've been a lurker for years, but posting, that's been interesting to me. Other than that, I've been a housefrau. I've been cooking and gardening and, taking care of the family and gossiping, Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Very good. Yeah.
I'm a retiree. I'm going to be 69, and it feels right on schedule to me. And it's funny because even talking about it, life developmentally, and I grew up in a traditional culture, where old people didn't achieve. They weren't about work or doing new things. They were about being in the family and taking care of their lives and taking care of their loved ones and, keeping food on the table. And there's something about that it sort of comes naturally to me to go there at this age. Those were all my role models, and I had a big family. So, my challenge is to, also take what gifts I have seriously enough to, continue to give them. And I don't have to go east of Broadway, which is a block east of me.
Yes, exactly. One block east. Yes.
So it suits my Enneagram 5 sort of personality.
Exactly.
But it's funny. You and I talk about this all the time, Nomali, and Lee, we have too. It's just the basic operating systems that we have are, they're real. And that's how we see the world. And one of the great things about integral consciousness is we can observe ourselves doing it, and that helps because that creates a new space of choice and awareness. But, that horse is still there, and that horse is going in a certain direction, and, you can be a more or less skilled rider, but, you can't change horses apparently.
Wow.
Very true.
Even if you don't like your horse, even if you got kind of a nasty horse. No, I'm just kidding. We all have beautiful horses, right? But we gotta be good riders.
So speaking of your particular horse, Jeff, you do have a talent to look at the world and look at the news and to reflect on it from an integral perspective. So that's what Nomali and I would like to invite you to do today as well. Looking back at 2022, you could highlight some of the most significant events for you, Jeff, and shine an integral light on it from your perspective.
Yeah, and let me just say that an integral view is a view of the evolution of consciousness and culture. That it's an idea that humanity is evolving through stages of development, and collectively, individually, so the cultures are also evolving. And so that's how we at Integral, or with the developmental view, look at the world. That's what we bring to the party. It's not the only story, but it's a really important story. And it's not being told really very much outside of the integral or developmental community. So that's, the piece I'm trying to bring to the party. And I think one of the things that sort of is a barrier for people thinking about development, that, the world is evolving to a better place, towards goodness, truth, and beauty, is that the mechanism of evolution is that the evolution to goodness is often done via things that are bad and things that are ugly and things that are false. It is a fallen world in a way. That's sort of the beginning. That's the first realization of Christianity is, Adam and Eve story. We fell from grace. In Buddhism, the first noble truth is that life is suffering. And so I feel like that has to be put on the table, first of all, is that this universe that we know, at least, this planet is fraught with difficulty. And most people are suffering. And I am, we all are. That's sort of a starting point. And, I think even of the Guinness Book of World Records for a book on the New York Times bestseller list is a book called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. Famous book, very important book in my life. And the first sentence is, life is difficult. So yeah, that is an important starting point. And then, we can see the movement of the evolution as we work our way forward, and we can see it geopolitically. I mean, one of the things that we can note as developmentalists is that the war in Ukraine, that is fundamentally a war between two developmental worldviews, one being autocratic. That would be, it's somewhere in traditional and warrior empire, that's a center of gravity, at least of Putin and the leadership of Russia. So that's all about, it's not about convincing people. It's not about leading people in, this Obama kind of way where you just present something that they want. It's about ruling. It's about building your empire. It's about being secure. And it's not, you don't want to join the modern world in a certain way. I mean, you can, in the exteriors, it could be trade, and, you see China sort of a flavor of autocracy, where they're knitted into the economics, but they don't want that liberal piece. The idea of shared power is anathema to an autocrat. I mean, look at Trump. He just doesn't, and it's not, they just don't get it. It doesn't make sense. It's frightening to them, and so that's the center of gravity of the Russian monolith. And then Ukraine, they have their problems, and they had all kinds of political consternations before the war. And in many ways, a fight in their own country between autocracy and modernity. But the center of gravity is modern. It's aspirational modern, and it's really so beautifully personified in Zelensky. How cool is he? I mean, he's postmodern. He's a comedian. He's like, it's meta on meta. He was the star of a show about being a comedian who gets to be president, and then he really actually is. And it's really something. So that, and then you see the modern world being what we would call the center of gravity modern world, Western Europe, Japan, Australia, NATO, the EU, coming together in resistance to this, new reviving of autocracy, military that Russia perpetrated. And that's interesting. And I, in some ways, from an integral point of view, the sort of developmental problem that we have to deal with on any subject is red. Guns, social media, it's the red underbelly that we have to watch out for, because it's violent. We're talking about the warrior/empire stage of development, which is completely evolutionarily appropriate for 95% of human history, or a lot of it at least. Once we evolve beyond red, so we get civilized in the traditional stage, but we still fight each other in terms of my civilization versus your civilization. And then there's a world-centric attitude that arises, that is what we have in NATO and the West for the most part. There's every stage arises on the underbelly of the previous stages, so that it's all still there. But in the modern world, we realize that there's something here worth fighting for: separations of power, personal freedom, material plenty, a freedom from the triumphalist narratives of the previous stages, self-expression, that these are, we actually have to engage our red in order to protect these things. And so, that's what we're seeing. And it's been, you can see it in the geopolitical realm with, the response to Russia, and, we'll see how that goes. But you can also see it in the United States with the latest election, where, the more moderate centrists won against the Trumpists, with the congressional committee, with basically how the modern structure held against an assault by pre-modern forces, or authoritarian forces. And that's that's a stage of development that we're at as humanity right now. And again, we can see it, and in that way, 2022. Can you say that's a good year for modernity? In a sense, we saw modernity rise. And of course, modernity, this is one of the things that autocrats and, people who have the heart of, they actually want to follow one person. They don't want these other people in there. Modernity is constantly chaotic. It's everybody's, and then you get into post-modernity with social media and all these voices and all this assault on values and expressions that are allowed. How do they allow that? Autocratic people don't get that. But here we are, and in the messiness of modernity, it turns out that there is a backbone. I'm happy to see that, and this year has been good for revealing that.
Well said, Jeff. And I don't know if you read Rob Smith of Integral Life, his piece about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He said that green has the power to convene, so the postmodern worldview level of development, and that the power to convene was basically the response of many nations to come together and, for instance, to impose all sorts of sanctions on Russia, and that the autocratic perspective tends to undervalue the power of higher developed structures because they don't present themselves violently.
Yeah, it's well said, actually. Yeah, what are you afraid of? They're not willing to fight. They're soft. I mean, this is what Hitler thought too. He's looking over at the movies in the United States, and he just thinks they're a bunch of weaklings. So yeah, they don't get it because we don't present violently. And that's really very key to a real center of gravity of modernity, is violence is out. You just can't do it. I mean, of course, the red underbelly is still there. But we also see, and I think this is should be noted from a developmental point of view, that even in tyrannies, there's developmental progress. Putin's Russia is not Stalin's Russia. Xi's China is not Mao's China. This is big development in terms of just the respect for individuals. I mean, a lot of ways, more to go, but this is also something that we can note and, factor in, So when I think of the resolution of the Russia-Ukraine war, first of all, I don't know. That's sort of an embracing of the postmodern view where, on social media, YouTube, particularly Twitter, any number of sources in the metaverse of this global brain that we have. I mean, I can listen to military experts on both sides. I can listen to diplomats on both sides. I can listen to the man in the streets interviews. I can listen to philosophers and actually see the war battles close up. They have these cameras on these drones. Listen to soldiers who have left the military and run away. And I mean, it's just an amazing. I think of how presidents of the United States, Kennedy during the Cuban Missile Crisis, he had in the Situation Room, he had 8 or 10 people that he could listen to. We can listen to everybody. And there's something about that. There's a wisdom that arises out of that where you don't necessarily clench on any one perspective or have an idea of how things ought to be. You still have an idea of how things ought to be and where you hope they go. And I noticed this in myself. I have my own red strata. It's like, fuck Russia. I love when I see them blowing up the tanks. Until I think about the soldiers in the tanks, because I have a green sensibility, and I could see all of this stuff online for me. But one of the things that I think de facto our leaders do take this into account is that the whole system is evolving. And sometimes it's like good old Pema Chodron says, you don't want to bring things to a painful point. You want to allow things to slow down, for people to get it, for people to grow, even in Russia, So I just want to factor that in as I think about the resolution of this war, that it will be some kind of a solution that will probably be unsatisfactory to all who have, a mono perspective. That's probably where we'll end up. And it'll be a different world after that. This is another one of the sort of obscene truths about evolution, is that conflict is very evolutionarily potent. Evolution likes it in a way. I hate to say it. And that's true of our own personal lives too. If we think of what really has made us grow in our lives, it's not things going well. I blame God for that. I don't think that was a good idea for creating this universe, but here we are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What are some other, world events that you recall as having, made you pause for a little bit and sort of think about it in that integral way? For example, actually, Lee and I were thinking of, what were some of the big things that happened this year? And there's like Iran, which is going on right now. Classic, traditional, modern, fight there, and like it's almost like, wow, it's really something to watch. And all the young people, the women, taking off their headscarves, and men joining them in their struggle, so certainly Iran is really interesting. Certainly, I mean, US politics is never boring. We had the last final January 6th hearing yesterday with criminal referrals against Trump. I'm wondering about AI and, GPT-3 and like the way artificial intelligence is doing the things that I don't even understand how to explain. But then how about, again, back to US, like things with guns, for example. What about Biden? What do you think about Biden, perhaps? How do you feel about the global kind of situation in relation to COVID, how that has evolved? Social media, Twitter, the NFT dude, Sam Bankman-Fried,
Yeah.
And the culture wars, Roe v. Wade, immigration,
Yeah. Yeah.
so climate, the whole climate discussion, China's zero COVID policy, which came to a bit of a halt. It's like, oh, I guess we might have to evolve that policy or, change that policy. And then there were just all these other things like the crisis in the UK with trusts and all the political drama that unfolded in the UK. Prisoner swaps, Brittany Griner, and I forget the Russian guy's name, but then all the sort of the prisoner swap stories. Shinzo Abe killed. Imran Khan was there was an assassination attempt against Imran Khan in Pakistan. The Chris Rock slap. Like that's all.
This year, wasn't it?
That was this year, yeah.
Yeah. Wow, talk about an eruption of red.
Yes. The sort of the ongoing supply chain disruption from a sort of that lower right struggles that are going on. The China-Taiwan tension, and Nancy Pelosi choosing to go to Taiwan and what that created. The death of the Queen, all these, of course the World Cup, and the having the World Cup in Qatar, and all the things that it was sort of enlightening the world too around LGBTQ issues, or like, can we sell beer in the stadium, and then the sort of what they're calling the sports washing, the beauty of the sport takes over and the issues are kind of swept under the rug. And speaking of sports, I'm also realizing, I've always thought about this, how sad it is that the United States doesn't have global domination or competency in competing in team sports at a world level. They always do well at the Olympics and all that, but I always think if only the United States was good enough to compete at global levels in one of the three big major global sports, because I don't think anything brings a country together when they're fighting at a global level for the same side. And I've often felt how sad that America almost never really gets to experience that.
Yeah. What's no, we think we're our own thing. We have American football, we have baseball, we have basketball. It's our culture. We had two oceans, on either side of us. But won World War II. We didn't have to pay attention in the way, and there's a downside to that. Totally. I mean, the liquid community around this World Cup, and just that sense of world-centric awareness is, I think, America will grow into that. I think that'll happen at some point, and I think this World Cup was probably a big step in that direction, because a lot of Americans were completely entranced by it.
Yeah.
And that's the beginning, and that's part of America moving into a world centrism in the interiors, where we pay attention to other cultures in a way that we didn't have to, or we didn't think we had to anyway, and other cultures have. There they are with each other. So it's cool to see how all of the things that you talked about, the whole list there, they can all be seen as this struggle forward, into more worlds, modern, classically liberal, then sort of this woke, world-centric, multicultural kind of move in humanity that is happening right before our eyes. I mean, if you think of social media even 5 years ago, Seems like forever ago. Or the things you could say or the ways you could think that, I credit woke worldview for a lot of that, where, the sensitivity to everybody's personal presentation, their own individual, sexual, racial, all of that is, that's becoming more and more, we're seeing past those things, I think, in a way that is really fruitful. I mean, of course, every stage of development is brought online by its fanatics. I think they have to be resisted. Think of Christianity, the fanatics in the warrior empire cultures. I mean, again, this world, but the fanatics do play their role. And, so we see it. Let's just start with your list. I think I made a note of all of them. So we have Iran. Yes, absolutely. An epic struggle between traditionalism and modernity. Traditionalism being fundamental religion. And they had a traditionalism, pretty early traditionalism, in the sense that women had to be covered, so that's the politics. But meanwhile, there's the culture, and Iran is a very educated culture. Persia has this amazing history. And Persian, it's important as we integrate the world that Persian must be, fully fluorescent, all the Russianness, all of it. We want all of it to be in the game, in the future, in the sacred world to come. But in the meantime, so that we have this morality, political state, and we have all the young people on Twitter or on TikTok. And, just getting fed images of people in the rest of the world. This never happened in traditionalism. People could go hundreds of years without having a whole lot of change in that kind of worldview. But now they do. As often happens, one of the keys of moving into modernity is a liberation of women into the public space, So women get to be whatever they want to be now. They don't just have to be home and with kids. And that's who's leading this charge in Iran. And, we'll see. I mean, there's a resistance, but there's also, it's like with COVID in China. At one point, the culture had this, backlash against the zero COVID policies. And the leadership kind of has to change. I mean, they really do. Even in autocracies, you have to pay attention to the will of the people, and they do. So I think that's, we'll see where Iran goes. They may be able to repress. I mean, these countries get good at that, but the long-term result is locked in, that Iran will move into modernity probably sooner than later. And then you have a country like Qatar, where all of a sudden, whatever it was, 100 or so years ago, a literally tribal society where, people, nomadic desert dwellers, find pitching their tents on an ocean of oil that the rest of the world wants. And so they have this, big move into modernity, in the sense that money flows in and they can build skyscrapers and they can build a modern society, but that interior is still working its way up, and it was fascinating to see the conversation around Qatar. They'll never be the same again, Qataris, and it's hard to overestimate the ways in which social media and just the mediaverse in general is educating people. Hard to even wrap your head around. I mean, how fast it's moving, not just in the States, but everywhere in the world. Africa, everybody's got a phone. They're all paying attention. There's problems with that. We've often talked about one of the sour spots in history is when you get modern technology in pre-modern hands, like weaponry, for instance. Hopefully we'll not blow ourselves up, but we can. That's kind of something to note. Let me just even jump ahead to climate just for something a little different. What I am noticing is that, well, first of all, let me just say that climate apocalypse is a feature of the religious aspect of climate, apocalypse believers. That's just part of that world-centric realization that, we've got one planet here. I mean, I saw this is something that I'd point out that it happened in, I guess it was the UK yesterday, a UN agreement among 200 countries to save biodiversity. That there's a lot of realization around, the rapacious downside of modernity that just goes in there and takes no culture or nature into account when there's mining to be done. That's the last 100 years, and so there has to be a realization. And human beings realize things religiously. We just do. It's built into us that we're gonna. We're sinners, and we've done, we've committed these sins, and we have to atone. And if we don't, we're going to have an apocalypse. And so that whole climate story has been very much downloaded into progressive culture. And in some ways, I feel bad about that because I have a couple kids in my life who are very demoralized. I don't think there's a future. I hate to see that religion foisted on kids until I think about, well, wait a second. When I was a kid, I was raised that if I was bad, I was going to burn in hell for all of eternity. And, I survived. Every stage has its religion. But here's what I'm noting in 2022, that there's a move, and I've seen it in the New York Times a couple times, where there was an article a week or so ago where it was actually I think it's the environmental minister of Canada, who used to be an environmental radical activist, and now he's inside, and he was talking about how, we still need to mine, and we still need to feed the, energy, and we have to take the planet into account in ways that we haven't before. But that rather than the doom fear-based model of religion, that we need to move into it, that we're doing all right. We actually have made progress, and that there's a way forward that's going to work or can work. And so that there's something that's inspiring about that actually integrates. This is integral. The integral stage is what happens after post-modernity, where we try to integrate the best of, the realizations of the previous stages. So we want modernity to continue, because modernity, it triples lifespans. We don't want to sacrifice the natural world to the human world, and that's the realization of post-modernity. And so I do see The Economist had a cover story on how climate doom story is being challenged, and that there's actually something positive and a way forward. So, I think we will continue to fight and friend our way forward on that issue. I'm happy to see the change in the culture, just glimmers.
It's really good technology that also helped with the latest sort of the breaking news with the nuclear fusion. That's the orange doing its thing, in the good positive way as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And and of course solar and wind and nuclear fusion. Nuclear plants are being brought back online, and nuclear technology that is considered safe. There's no 3 Mile Island option where they melt down and pollute the whole scene. So yes, we will, electric cars, LED light bulbs. Funny, if you just even look at humanity as an organism, if you sort of step back and just look at this humanity on this planet, it's amazing to see how we're responding to the challenges that we face. Sometimes I just marvel at it,
Zooming out and looking at humanity as an organism or as a person, you could say that when people have to change their behavior because their health is endangered, and we could make the analogy, of course, with humanity and the climate crisis, then people often have to experience some level of depression and doom and thinking of death and destruction before they are motivated enough to make sustainable choices. So in a way, I think what we're seeing is a natural phenomenon in the human species.
Yeah,
It's an interesting thing because this sort of, again, our interiors, I don't know how we are often motivated unless there is a little bit of shouting, and like the squeaky wheel gets the oil concept, right? So I guess like the climate is a very serious issue, and we all have to be doing everything we can to fix it. And at the same time, don't fall into the very, very depressing, we're completely doomed, so we might as well just give up also. Yep. So it's the sort of the polarity there is like work your butt off and also calm down a little bit and let's get our heads straight. And is that what I'm hearing from you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I don't think that it was a wrong turn that we would have a religion of climate apocalypse. I think it was right on schedule, is right on schedule. I mean, the new Avatar movie, the old Avatar movie, biggest movie of all time. It's just, in some ways, it's sort of cookie cutter apocalyptic, but on the other hand, it's all over the world. And people of all stages of development are getting this kind of download that, art's a funny thing. It can penetrate all kinds of intellectual resistance or whatever, and so it's all just part of the awakening and of humanity to the next challenge. And I would also say that developmentally that just part of the postmodern affect is depression and maybe even a little bit of nihilism. And that may be right on schedule too, because at some point after World War II, it was clear to the people who survived it that we could no longer rely on these narratives of my culture is supreme or that my God is supreme. In fact, God was gone after, modernity killed God. So we have, if you think about developmentally, we move from a stage where it's like Ken Wilber said, I always love this. He said, we move from a stage in traditionalism where God is everywhere to a stage in modernity where God is nowhere. And so one of the sort of problems with that is, then who are we? What are we doing here? What's the meaning of this? And so there's a certain anxiety that arises in modernity, because we don't have that religious, foundation. And then we move into postmodernity, which is an active deconstruction of all truth claims, absolutely appropriate evolutionarily. But it's like, then what do we believe in? And for a lot of particularly academic postmodernity, it's a ratcheting back down to red. It's like, well, then it's all just power. Everything is reduced to power structures, and there's truth to that. It's funny. Power is very much alive and well, and a lot of the wheels turn just because of the force of the power. But this is where Integral comes in, because Integral does offer a story that reenchants the world, to me, at least, that 13.8 billion years ago something arose out of nothing and has complexified itself to this moment and to this the culture that we're in. And we can see that even though it's been arrived at through a lot of lies and violence and ugliness, that we're living in a better world, that it's a more decent world where people have enough to eat. They have the indoors. We're about to have at 13, 14 degrees below zero here, Nomali, in Boulder. And, it's not going to be life-threatening for humans, at least. So, there is something about the next stage of development that wants to, it's like that New York Times article, that wants to see a promised land, that wants to see that we're actually getting somewhere and that we can take heart in that and not be stuck in the deconstructive, sort of lost worlds of modernity and postmodernity. And we see that a lot. I mean, I saw a tweet, and I'm forgetting who did it, but it was somebody in the integral scene. And they said that it's now clear that the benefits of social media were not worth the downsides. And I don't agree with that. But I will say that there are tremendous downsides, particularly for young people, of having this unlimited world of social media, where people aren't putting their miserable foot forward. Some are. Actually, it's kind of interesting to see on Twitter people who are just so honest about their suffering. I mean, I actually am amazed by it in a way. But for the most part, for kids and stuff, it's Kim Kardashian. I'm probably hopelessly dated with Kim Kardashian, but it's this status thing, this idea that everybody's happy but me. Everybody's doing that. I think is we have to pay attention to. It's like, I think we've talked about this before actually, but human beings are so deeply wired to connect with each other. We just really like to get in the game with each other, and all the communication is just, you can't get enough of it. And it's a little bit like calories. We're just programmed to go for calories. So we like sweets and we like fats. And at some point you realize you just can't have all the food just because there's food all around you. You can't eat it all the time. And there's an arising understanding that, you have to put the phone down at some point. And with kids, maybe you have to make them put the phone down. I don't know. I mean, there's one of the Republican senators just put forth a bill that all porn sites have to verify age. It's like, yes. I mean, when did we vote on that an 8-year-old can see the most wretched pornography that the human mind can conceive of? I don't get it. I mean, it's so, yes, there has to be a reckoning about social media, and particularly kids. I think it's, kids are always a flashpoint. Everybody wants to get the kids. And, you could see why. That's all. I think that's been true for human history. So anyway, I mean, that's part of the mess that we're in right now, and figuring out. And, I'm all for that. I think it's might be Mike Lee from Utah who put that forth. I think maybe it was, but, yes, let's do that. How hard can that be? Will it be perfect? No, but right now it's like astonishing. And then, you think of these pre-modern countries where our satellites are pumping this down into their families and their kids, No. So anyway, I think that's a reckoning. I think that's one of the things we're working on right now.
True. And Jeff, just for people watching who would like to follow you on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle?
@DailyEvolver. Yeah. So it's that continuing the Daily Evolver brand. And how about Twitter, huh? How about Elon?
Yeah, what's your thoughts about the whole Elon saga?
Yeah, well, I'm putting together my first podcast for the new year. I'm going to cover him at least to some degree. I think he's an interesting, I think integral developmental psychology really helps us to understand him. I think he's some version of a spiral wizard, if you will. To be a spiral wizard, it's sort of a little bit of a jargon, but it's somebody who can operate at many stages of development at the same time. And so, you can see Elon, it's hard to imagine somebody who has had more actual impact on the world for good than Elon Musk. In terms of particularly third person, in terms of technology, in terms of the electric cars and the batteries and the rockets that can land and the Starlink that has been so consequential for Ukraine that kept their internet going. I mean, how do you overestimate the contribution of a person who kept the internet on in Ukraine, through a Starlink system? So, he's got that in spades and, in many ways towards very progressive goals of, and in terms of energy and communication and all of that good stuff. So he can operate there. But what's interesting about him is that he can also operate on the what we would say the lower levels. We see this in successful people often. There's a certain lack of empathy, lack of being able to read other people. So, what you do is you go in, we were talking about this before. It's like, you don't really persuade, you rule. It's like Putin versus Obama. You rule. And so you go in and this is how it is. And if you're right more than you're wrong, you can really create something because there's a certain part of all of us that actually, maybe not all of us, but I can get it. I can see where following a big daddy or a big mama who's really knows what they're doing and really has a vision that I want to follow. I don't want there to be a separation of powers here. I want that person. So he's managed to do that in 4 or 5 different industries at the same time. It's hard. He, to me, expands the idea of what a human being can be and do. It's like that dog on 60 Minutes that Anderson Cooper had, the dog chaser that can find any one of 600 toys. It's like it blows any idea of what dogs can do. It's like that's what Elon Musk does with humans. So he can do that in that sort of authoritarian way. But then what's also, I think, really interesting about him, and this is the part that scares me because it's red, and red is scary, and it ought to be scary because it's, it's unpredictable, it's chaotic, not violent. It's like you have people like him and Trump. They both have this ability to go red, and so red is this, particularly when it's in the context of being civilized. These aren't violent people, but they do violence to the any kind of settled thought. Basically, it's like, look at me. They're upending the apple cart. They're breaking the china. They're inconsistent. It's just the currency is more attention than it is even winning, in a way. I think Trump, for instance, right now, he's enjoying this. He'll enjoy a trial if the Department of Justice indicts him, because he'll have the attention of the world. So does Elon Musk. It's like, I really, in a way, resent this. But I have to check in every day to see what Elon's doing. And I remember that was like the Trump show for the last 5 years, where every day Trump would have a new episode, where he's going up against somebody or he's just causing chaos. And there is something powerful about that, and that I want to respect as an integralist, where there's one of the ways forward is to just get in there and bust things up, because things get calcified, and it's not pretty. I'm not sure that they are doing it with any kind of self-awareness. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, with both of these guys, I don't know whether they have self-awareness around it or not, but they are forces of nature in that way that, you know, if you think back in the warrior and empire days, you woke up every morning and who are you going to fight? I mean, fighting was what you did. It wasn't even about winning. You know, you could lose, but you still fought. So that's that. I think that's one of the things that I would also notice about Elon Musk, so that he's really able to operate on all these levels, which of course makes him into a spiral wizard. And there's something about him that's integral, you know, in terms of, but, you know, it also reveals something about development itself, both in cultures and in individuals, is that it's chaotic. You know, the people who are even willing to go red, you have to keep an eye on them. You have to provide some boundaries for them, and so this is sort of what I'm, you know, reading with him.
With Twitter, it was interesting when he just yesterday, I guess, posted, you know, who should be the CEO, or should I step down from the CEO position or something. I don't know if you noticed that Lex Friedman tweeted saying, give it to me. You know, Lex always talks about how he wants to spread love through Twitter. So it's interesting. I mean, I guess we can talk about leadership in general, that if someone, whoever is at the top does matter, you know, and Lex is this, I do think it'll be amazing if Lex Friedman would become the CEO.
I know, no, I would love it. I guess. I mean, part of it is he's also an engineer, right? I mean, he actually knows his way around.
That's the main thing. Yeah. I mean, he's an AI specialist, expert in AI and researcher in AI, but also talks about love. you know, I want people like him and Tristan Harris to be the kinds of leaders that really take over. We definitely need integral thinkers taking over these kinds of roles, and that's a big ask, and who knows when that will happen. And so
no, I agree. I mean, I would we'll see country, you know, different regulatory bodies come in, and you know, if they do regulate pornographers, you know, that's a good move. The Europeans are doing regulations of social media that is ahead of, as they always are, ahead of the game. So I think that's happening, and people are becoming hip to it. People are realizing, wait a second, I don't want to be manipulated like this, and I can see how I have been manipulated by this. What did you say, Nomali? Something about engage, outrage, or
engagement by enragement?
Yes, engagement by enragement. That's programmed in so far.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Yeah. Now, it's to keep you there longer. So when you are these days enjoying Twitter so much, it's also AI doing that to you.
Yes, exactly. Now, and I can control it to some degree.
Yeah.
But I will say that when I spend an hour or two on Twitter, I will often have that kind of feeling like I've been to a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, I don't want to be glib, because war zones in the real world, non-virtual world, is a whole different ball game. Mm-hmm. But still, you know, it's about defeating your enemy in any way that you can. And there are, you know, dead bodies strewn about, and so to speak. And this is actually something else we can see developmentally, is that the center of gravity of human engagement moves from physical to subtle. And, you know, if things go according to integral theory, to eventually spiritual. And we, of course, are doing all of those all the time. But one of the gifts of modernity is that we do get sort of the physical needs handled. And to the degree that we become fully modern, we no longer go to war. with weapons. But the war continues. But now it's the war of ideologies, and it's actually it's a war of worldviews. If you go on Twitter, you can see the worldviews fighting. You can see the traditionalists, you can see the woke postmodern, you can see the people who just want the trains to run on time, the modernists, and they're all in there. And yeah, sometimes it's like, damn, I need to get out of here. And fortunately, you can if you're not completely addicted, and I'm only partially addicted.
Yeah.
So, and but I am partially addicted. I get it, and I see it, and it's like, wow. Why am I continuing to feel like Skinner's pigeons? I keep pecking at the keyboard. It's like I want to stop, but I can't. But anyway, sorry, Lee.
I was going to contextualize your tweets because I've seen some of them, and it's not, when you say it's a sort of a fighting environment or a war zone, that what I've seen of your tweets is that you bring a meta perspective to the people with whom you engage. So basically you frame things in a more inclusive way. So you typically, when somebody takes a position, you add a position to make it more nuanced. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. That's sort of seems to be what I do more or less naturally. And when I like that you use the word inclusive, because this is one of the ways of looking at the move from postmodern to integral, is that postmodern wants to include people that have been marginalized, basically people who different races and genders and fluid, all that sort of thing. But they still want you to be postmodern. If you're traditional, they don't really want you in the tent. So one of the things about integral is it's an inclusivity of worldviews, where you yourself have an integral consciousness that where these various worldviews, you can see them. You can see how they grab you. You can see how you're captive to them, but you can, on a good day, see them instead of be them. And so you can see the goods and bads about all of them. And that's one of the things that, I see other people doing it too online. I see people who are sort of bored with fighting for their own ideologies. This is one of the fruits of the, of the arena of combat, is that at some point, it's like a teenager, you just sort of outgrow it. And people are. I see people who are, there's a concept I never heard of 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, but you see it all the time, steel manning. I guess people talked about it, but I never heard about it. And now it's a thing. And it's the idea of rather than define your opponents by their worst qualities, you try to, present their best qualities. And that's the thing on Twitter now. Not that big, but it's bigger than it used to be. And I want to notice that, because I think that's something that's happening at the point of cultural evolution, is that there's a move towards post-ideological, where I think our grandchildren will look back on this era as the great ideological war, the era of the ideological warfare. Mm-hmm. And they'll roll their eyes. It's like, why were they so worked up? Let's just get on with it. Let's have a nice day. Yeah. But that's us, and here we all are. Yeah. And there's a lot more to go. I don't know if it's grandchildren. It's the way evolution is accelerating. It could be our grandchildren, probably for sure our great grandchildren. But it's it's like Ken Wilber would say, is that, what would he say, Nomali? It's 2/3 of the world is still pre-modern, basically traditional or earlier in terms of their center of gravity. A lot of the world is, and yet this internet we're getting this sort of integral sensibility that we're adding to it. It's quite chaotic and causes a lot of troubles, but you can see evolution doing its work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we should probably wind down, but so just real quickly, maybe before we let you go, how do you feel about Biden?
Well, I just read a column in the New York Times. I don't know if you guys see it, but every week, Brett Stevens, who's sort of their center right guy, has a discussion with Gail Collins, their sort of center left columnist, and they're friendly, but they fight, and it's great. But one of the things they talked about was that there is what was it that you just asked me, because I was going there.
Biden, just a little.
Oh, Biden, yes.
Biden,
That Biden is going to use this Christmas holiday as a time to reflect on what he's going to do, because the election, the midterms behind us, and now we're looking forward to the presidential election in 2024, and he's going to decide that he's going to retire and he's not going to pursue the presidency. I hope that's true, simply because I think he's too old. And I think that's showing up. But it also is interesting to see what he's done and the accomplishments he's made. And there's a lesson there. And I'm happy to learn this lesson, because I'm old myself, or older than I used to be, that you can sort of lose words and you can get a little scrambled, but your bigger judgment actually, and your bigger wisdom actually is still there. And you can, sit back and sort it out and make a better decision than you might have when you were in your earlier years. And I think that's true of him. And yet he's a politician. He is, he has to keep his base happy. He has to be more extreme in many ways than I would want him to, that most people actually would want him to be, but he has to keep, it's like Trump with his MAGA people. He has to sort of have to feed that beast. But yeah, all in all, I think that Biden will be looked back on as a very successful president. And I hope he turns it over to who? Maybe Jared Polis, Nomali, our governor. He wants to be president, and he's kind of he's a very popular Mayor Pete.
I actually think, even though a lot of people dislike Kamala Harris, I actually wonder about Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg running.
Yeah, I wish I liked her better, but. I sure like Pete. I'd vote for the Pete ticket if he was the president. That's actually one of the problems. I think Kamala Harris has not ignited in a way that I don't think most people really. If Biden ran with Harris, that would be a big problem for him, especially at his age, because whoever is his vice presidential candidate is going to be very consequential. And is he going to want to drop her? Boy, that would be a problem for the base. So I don't know. Yeah.
Well, Pete Buttigieg.
So I think a clean slate would be better.
Yeah.
I mean, she can get in the arena and fight for it. And the history's funny. A moment. Sometimes people rise to the moment. I'm good if she would. Yeah. But I think there's some other people to consider.
Yes. The Pete Buttigieg is far from, unfortunately, being able to run, because I think even within the Democratic Party, there's a lot of people. He can't get the black vote, for example, or the Latino vote, for example, that kind of thing.
A good politician, that's the hand he's going to have to play.
Yeah.
And also from the right, is the world ready for Pete and Chaston and their children to walk up to the stairs of the White House, and we have a first laddie instead of a first lady?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, we're moving fast, but that may be a stretch. And that's also true for Jared Polis. He's married to his husband, and they have 2 kids. Yeah. So and also on the right, it looks like Trump's going down. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Every time you think you got him, he slips away. So I say that provisionally, but it doesn't look good. Even with Tucker Carlson saying he won't say he would support him. That's significant. And of course, everybody thinks it's then Ron DeSantis, but that's what we thought it was, Scott Walker, and nobody even remembers Scott Walker anymore. But he was the one that everybody thought was going to be the Republican nominee until he wasn't. This is a big reset for the country, this next presidential election. So I'm riveted by it already.
Yeah. Anything you want to say, Lee?
No, I can't really contribute to the American politics discussion meaningfully.
No, anything else? Yeah, something else.
No, I just want to thank.
Well, what's going on in that crazy Britain, the UK?
Well, that was
Fill us
quite.
in.
Well, I've been following it tangentially because I live in the Netherlands, but I'm originally from the UK. But so I hear some murmurings of what's been going on, but as I understand it, just like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, they had this sort of basically very niche idea of how economics works. And Liz Truss basically took that same economic thinking and tried to apply it to the UK of today. And it resulted in enormous financial instability and a large number of people who did not want to support the direction in which the government seemed to be moving. So she was basically forced to resign. And this is all, of course, after Boris Johnson resigned. And one of the things that happened in the UK was a newspaper printed a lettuce and a photo of Liz Truss and said, who will spoil first? So the lettuce or Liz Truss. And it was somewhat comical, of course, that Liz Truss was out of
I remember that actually.
Downing Street before the lettuce had spoiled. So yeah, there's been some upheaval, and then of course she was replaced by someone with a very firm grasp on economics, but who is also, of course, a multimillionaire. And there's more stability, but there's also a lot of displeased voices around the fact that there's someone in power who has very little feeling with the majority of people who are suffering amidst rising gas and other energy prices. So that's what I know. But I, of course, also hear from these things from very partial news sources. So I think we'll have a more complete picture in a number of years when we can analyze the full situation.
Yeah,
that's my take.
Well, at least we have King Charles III.
True.
I mean, the monarchy is, talk about a developmental view. We have this traditional, even the empire, that sort of empire red thing that had prior to World War II. And then, that falls apart or relaxes. And then we have, Charles, kind of postmodern, environmental conscious. We have William, seems to be kind of more sort of secular, middle of the road. And then we have Harry and Meghan, our postmodern royalty, the royalty of green, sensitivity, victimization, transgression. And it's all playing out in this one family, which is such a easy structure for humans to relate to and get really interested. So it's like a soap opera for in some ways the world, but for sure the Anglo world, and it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, maybe we close the call, Jeff, by asking you if you have any kind of a prediction or a desire that you wish to see for yourself or for the world or for the integral community. What would you like to say as we kind of enter 2023? What will be interesting to you?
Well, I think, what I try to do is just notice the updraft of emergence. I notice it in myself that there's always a new Jeff wanting to be brought forth. there's something new arising in the culture, in the world space. And I think keeping just noticing that at this point is that's my mission. And so, I guess I'll keep doing that for the duration. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yes. So thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Nomali. And Jeff, also thanks for going into Twitter every day and fighting the good fight for all of us.
Yes, it's my pleasure. I mostly find it fun. And yeah, thank you, Lee Mason. Thank you, Nomali Perera. And I encourage people to check out your Practical Integral site and your wonderful coaching and all the good stuff you're doing. And it's really been fun to be with you.
Well, thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. We'll see you another time.
All righty.
All right.
Have a good
Bye.
day. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. See you next time.
All right.
Bye.